both of these are figures who are not particularly well closely associated with the sort of Boris Johnson, Liz Truss era. So it does seem to be Back to the Future from that point of view for the Conservatives, but pretending some of the last few years didn't happen.
The mini reshuffle carried out by Rishi Sunak. Ben Wallace formally resigning this morning, having said he was going to a month ago. Grant Shapps replaces him as Defence Secretary. Claire Coutinho moves from being a junior Education Minister to be promoted into the Cabinet as Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero. David Johnson, another 2019 MP, like Claire Coutinho, he comes in to replace her as a Minister at Education. Well, what does it all mean? Watching it all live from Westminster Voice is Chris Smyth, Whitehall editor for The Times. Afternoon, Chris. Just remind us, first of all, why is Ben Wallace gone now, forcing this mini shake-up?
Yes, hello, Matt. Ben Wallace announced over the summer that he wanted to quit as an MP next year and therefore stand down as a defence secretary. He said he had done his time after 4 years in this job and previously as security minister. Now, the timing is odd because Rishi Sunak had been expected to use this opportunity to conduct a wider reshuffle, but he has opted to delay that till later in the autumn. It does raise the question of why he couldn't have persuaded Ben Wallace to stay on for a couple more months as to avoid having to do two reshuffles, which are always distracting for ministers, and see them jockeying somewhat for position in the meantime. But it has, in the event, been a very limited reshuffle, really, in a couple of ministerial moves. I mean, Grant Shapps is a surprise as Defence Secretary. No one really expected that. His fifth cabinet job in less than a year, and yet another indication of the turmoil that we have seen recently. But those close to Sunak say, he has been impressed by Shapps' work in government and also respects his experience. One of the few people in government who was there on day one of David Cameron's government, and wants him to use that and use his undoubted communication skills in a more senior job with the government and to sell the government's policy on Ukraine to Western allies.
The interesting thing, actually, it struck me, Chris, was the actually defence, although clearly a very important job when it comes to national security and making sure that, the big money contracts don't get delayed and cost more than they should have done, and shoring up relations with Ukraine and so on. It's not a very, political job, given that everyone seems to basically support what the government strategy is. And actually, Grant Shapps is one of the government's strongest communicators in energy, was a much more sort of public-facing, cost of living sort of a role. And they might be sort of be missing out a bit. I mean, we don't hear a lot from Ben Wallace, has to be said, as Defence Secretary. When you do, it's about standing shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine. In terms of, the politics of the next election, I'm a bit surprised that he didn't stay at that sort of retail politics job at Energy.
Yes, that has raised some eyebrows. I mean, what people in Number 10 say is that just because you're Defence Secretary doesn't mean you can't go around the Today programme studios talking about the cost of living. They say other Defence Secretaries have done this in the past. We are still expected to see quite a lot of Grant Shapps in that role. And the argument is with a bigger government job, you'll have more clout to speak for the government more broadly. But you're right, it is a less inherently political job for him to have in the run-up to the election. Of course, it probably does mean fewer rows between the MOD and the government over money, which was something that bedeviled Ben Wallace's time. Those who read his resignation letter will see several spiky comments about the need to maintain funding, and you would expect Grant Shapps to be a little less blunt about his demands for more cash for the military, something which is already alarming some of the top brass, but yes, it is a less political role. It does invite scrutiny of Claire Coutinho, who is thrust into a very important job with very little government experience.
And a mini reshuffle going on behind the scenes as well. Jamie Njuku Goodwin comes on the show a lot, is Chief Executive of UK Music, representing the music industry. He's joining Number 10 as Director of Strategy. We've also got Adam Atashthai, who was a Special Advisor to David Cameron, going back into Number 10 to become a Senior Advisor. Is this a sign of sort of beefing up the political operation behind the scenes before what's expected to be a bigger reshuffle, probably now after the party conference?
I think so. It does signal gradual shift towards election footing for the government, bringing back people who've been around Westminster a while are respected. And Jamie is not someone who will be well known to people outside of Westminster, But within Westminster, Rishi Sunak seems to have done well to attempt to back from his life of rooftop pool bars and music festivals to toil in the basement of Number 10 in the run up to a thankless-looking election.
Mm.
And both of these are figures who are not particularly well closely associated with the sort of Boris Johnson, Liz Truss era. So it does seem to be back to the future from that point of view for the Conservatives, but pretending some of the last few years didn't happen.
Well, one person knows exactly what happened over the last few years, Nadine Dorries. We're hearing, because we haven't spoken about it enough this week, we're hearing a book on Boris Johnson's downfall is being delayed. It was due out on September the 28th. It's called The Plot, The Political Assassination of Boris Johnson. It was due out on September the 28th, just before the Conservative Party conference. It's now going to come out on November the 9th, which is very much after it. So the plan to sort of blow up the conference has been delayed. Apparently it's because of the huge volume of material the author has consulted.
Yes, well, it's good to see Nadine Dorries' loyalty to Boris Johnson extends to adopting his habit of missing deadlines.
Yeah, and good news for those of us who've got a book coming out mid-October. Chris, lovely to speak to you. Whitehall editor of the Times, Chris Smyth there, joining us live from Westminster with that politics roundup following the reshuffle by Rishi Sunak this morning.